SiriusXM Progress.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live here Friday, November 4th, the last Friday before Election Day. And right now, very happy to welcome Glenn Kirschner back, former 30-year federal prosecutor, served in the U.S. Army and JAG Corps. You see him as a legal analyst on MSNBC and NBC. And, of course, Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner. He is very popular YouTube channel. Glenn, welcome back to the show, brother.
Hey, Dean, great to be with you.
And thanks especially. Glenn has been going to the Oath Keepers trial, Stuart Rhodes, and documenting it. I actually watched your video. It's a great video for Justice Matters on Kash Patel. And I wanted to break it down for people. Before we talk about what could be the transactional part of this, I'd love you to give people a sense of the process, like how you get to the point, like you laid it out on your video, how you get to a point where a witness actually gets an offer of immunity. And Kash Patel, to remind people, a former top Donald Trump aide.
Yeah, so I try to use an example that's more of a real world example. Let's use a murder case. So if I'm investigating somebody I suspect committed a murder, the target of the investigation, and I want to subpoena his girlfriend, for example, I subpoena her to the grand jury. She walks in and she pleads the fifth. She invokes her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I have to figure out why. Let me tell you, Dean, I subpoenaed thousands of people in my decades as a prosecutor. Some of them will plead the fifth in knee-jerk fashion just as a way to try to avoid having to testify for any number of reasons. But you can only invoke your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination if your truthful testimony would tend to incriminate you. So sometimes the target's girlfriend would plead the fifth, and then we would have to go before the judge and litigate whether she in fact had a privilege to invoke. And it turned out she didn't do anything wrong. She didn't commit a crime. She had no culpable involvement in the murder, so she couldn't plead the fifth. So the judge would order her to testify. However, let's assume she gave her boyfriend the gun to commit the murder or was his getaway driver from the murder. Then she has a fifth. Then the judge would rule she has a fifth, and the only way you can get at her testimony is if you grant her immunity. Because when a prosecutor immunizes a witness, it extinguishes their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Why? Because the statements they make can't be used against them. We're giving them immunity. So it looks like what happened, Dean, is Kash Patel went after he pleaded guilty, that's a Freudian slip, pleaded the fifth in the grand jury. The prosecutors dragged him before Chief Judge Beryl Howell, who has supervisory authority over the grand jury in DC, and they litigated whether he actually has a fifth or not. Judge Howell ruled that he does. What can we tease out of that? He's done something wrong, and if he testified truthfully, it would tend to incriminate him. So at that point, DOJ had a decision to make. When we find out somebody did something wrong and has a fifth, we have to see whether we can charge them with that crime that is prompting them to plead the fifth, charge them, negotiate a guilty plea with cooperation, and then use them as a cooperating witness. Or if we can't go that route, either because we don't have enough evidence to charge them, or we decide it's just not in our interest to do that, we can grant them immunity, and then we can force them, compel them to testify in the grand jury. Now, if they go in the grand jury and they lie, the immunity doesn't protect them. And it's funny, I was on with Lawrence O'Donnell the other night, and he asked me precisely that question. He said, Glenn, what do you do with a Kash Patel if he goes into the grand jury and he still lies to try to help Donald Trump, even after he's been granted immunity? And I answered, I said, Lawrence, I breathe a sigh of relief. Why? Because look, we're not going to get a lot out of Kash Patel. He's not going to be a cooperative witness, anxious to incriminate his man, Donald Trump. But if he lies, that then gives us the leverage we need to charge him. That's perjury. That's obstructing justice. It's potentially accessory after the fact, and it's more evidence that he's in an ongoing conspiracy with Donald Trump. So now we don't have to worry about the immunity. We can charge him with all of those crimes and develop him as a cooperating witness. That's a down and dirty overview of how we deal with immunity and what's going on in the Kash Patel case.
Kash Patel actually worked in the Department of Justice at one point as a trial attorney. So I think he would understand
exactly
what you're saying. Oh, that's a good point. They can go in there for the right reasons, end up getting turned by Trump, or maybe Kash Patel was looking for a reason to become Trumpian. So when you say that they go before a judge and the judge hears, is it to the point where there's actually a proffer of evidence? Does it, like when you're making this deal, I want to understand this.
Yeah.
You give immunity to Kash Patel. For DOJ to do that, do they have to believe that it's worth it? Like it's worth it in the bigger picture of the case they're building?
Absolutely. We never give immunity sight unseen, Dean. Let's go back to my example in the murder case where the girlfriend doesn't want to testify. If I just say, you know what, I'm giving you immunity. Now you have to testify, even though I don't know what you're going to say. What does she do? She walks into the grand jury and says, I'm the killer. Well, she just really, threw a monkey wrench into my case. So there is a process. It's called the Carter debriefing. It's a very long, drawn out explanation. But basically, we try to get a proffer of information from the defense attorney for the person pleading the fifth about why that person is invoking their right against self-incrimination. What is it they know? What is it they did? But here's the thing. They don't have to tell us. When we go into the chief judge's chambers, this is all done behind closed doors because grand jury matters are secret and litigating a Fifth Amendment privilege is secret. They have to provide the judge information about why Kash Patel can invoke his fifth. But strictly speaking, they don't have to provide it to the government. So there can be a little bit of a risk involved. But here's the thing. I don't care one whit about whether Kash Patel goes to jail for his crimes. I hope he does. I hate granting people immunity because it also diminishes their value as a trial witness because immunity allows for robust cross-examination at trial by the defense attorney, but I don't really care about Kash Patel. If Kash Patel can incriminate Donald Trump, then give him immunity and let's get to the good stuff.
So Glenn, it's fair to say, to sum up a little bit here, Kash Patel, there is a credible good faith basis to believe he was involved in some kind of crime. And so that he gets the Fifth Amendment because there was some showing to the judge of that. It doesn't mean, though, that he's going to go up there and flip-flop on the story he told publicly, does it? That publicly he said, Donald Trump declassified every document. Magically, he closed his eyes and like, I Dream of Jeannie, everything was declassified. It doesn't seem to make sense, but do they also know the answer to that question? Do you think the DOJ knows what he's really going to say about that?
I hope they do, and we generally do, because we will have sort of investigated around Kash Patel in 1,000 different ways, and I'll bet DOJ is satisfied that they know what the truthful answer is. And frankly, if it were me, again, I would be hoping Kash Patel would lie because that would dig his legal hole even deeper. I suspect he'll go in there and weasel around and say, I don't remember this and I don't remember that. And some of what I said was hyperbole. And he probably won't say enough to get himself indicted. Because as you say, he was a prosecutor at DOJ. I don't think he was a particularly good one based on what I was hearing. I think he presented some issues, so to speak. But he's probably smart enough not to go into the grand jury and lie under a grant of immunity.
Right. So, I mean, is part of this from the DOJ, if you're building a case that you want to get on the record what Kash Patel is going to say about a potential defense that Donald Trump could raise, even though declassified or classified, there are still other crimes. And it is incredible to believe that Donald Trump declassified these documents, regardless of that. But if DOJ has on the record where he even hems and haws, goes, well, I don't know if he really declassified. He sort of told me he did, but I don't really know if he did, something like that. That ends at defense. The defense can't call Kash Patel to go, oh, you see, Kash Patel, I told Kash Patel, and he saw my documents declassifying. That's gone. That closes that door.
Yeah, at best, they're going to neutralize Kash Patel as a potential defense witness for Donald Trump. But I think they're going to end up getting some information out of Kash Patel that will tend to incriminate Donald Trump. I have a feeling because, listen, Kash Patel didn't just magically think, oh, maybe I should just lie and say Donald Trump declassified everything, but Donald Trump never told me to say that. I mean, that strains credulity, right? So there were obviously conversations between Patel and Trump that led to Patel announcing he magically declassified everything. Well, no, he didn't. And that's transparently absurd. But don't forget, before Kash Patel was, one of Donald Trump's ride or die guys, he was a Devin Nunes flunky, right? This is not an accomplished person. This is somebody who seems to be drunk on his proximity to power.
he was on, as the media reported, on Monday, he was on a right-wing podcast saying, I'm still with the boss. And the host asked him about potentially him being the next FBI director if Trump wins. He goes, I would love to do that kind of thing. Like, are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind, Kash Patel? So, all right. So putting Kash Patel aside, let's talk about the reporting from CNN. It's based on source reporting that Merrick Garland's considering a special counsel to appoint if Donald Trump becomes a candidate before they're ready to charge him, if they're ever going to charge him. Just what's your action at the idea at this late date to raise the idea of special counsel?
Well, Dean, I'm going to take a deep breath because you're the first one I'm talking with about this. And I have reached a pretty firm conclusion in my mind pretty quickly that this is a bad idea. And here's why I think it's a bad idea. Our democracy is on fire, right? Hanging by a thread. Use the catchphrase that, conveys to your satisfaction that we're on the cusp of losing it all. If we now appoint a special counsel, that will delay matters by many, many, many months. Now you need to put an entire new team together, get them up to speed on the investigation that has been conducted thus far, and then let them launch their own investigation. Look at how well that turned out with Mueller, right? Bob Mueller, I think, investigated it well and thoroughly and professionally and documented 10 obstruction of justice crimes, all of which went nowhere. And now statutes of limitations are expiring, and we may never be able to bring any of those crimes. Why? Because of DOJ's delay. And if they appoint a special counsel, it will involve more delay, significant delay. And Dean, we don't have time for more delay. I maintain that there should have been indictments prior to the midterms, but now we have insurrectionists running for re-election to Congress because they haven't been dealt with in a timely manner, right? They want to more firmly entrench themselves in our government so they can continue to try to kill us from within. I don't understand the DOJ hesitancy to act. And here's the thing. Do you really think you're going to appease the Donald Trump supporters, lackeys, and loyalists by appointing a special counsel? All of a sudden, they're going to say, well, I guess this is fair and independent. Are you kidding me? Not to mention, Dean, what batch of information will the special counsel start with? The information that has been developed by the current DOJ prosecutors. So there will also be an allegation that everything that was given to them, the special counsel, was tainted. I mean, there are 1,000 reasons to dislike the appointment of special counsel at this point. If it was going to be done, it should have been done on, January 7th or as soon as Merrick Garland was confirmed. Yep. This drives me crazy. The inaction by our Department of Justice when there are violations of law that we could prove beyond a reasonable doubt in our sleep against Donald Trump, and we're not doing it.
I could not agree with you more. And it almost seems like a layer of plausible deniability in a way for Garland to say, well, the special counsel didn't find anything, or here's his report, but now we're only a year from the election for president and Donald Trump's going to be the nominee. So how can I charge the nominee? And I'm tired of people, even who are on our side, who are, I hate to use the term gaslighting because they're not doing it intentionally. They are lulling people into a sense that Garland's got it. I wish Garland got it. I wish he would have indicted Donald Trump. I wish November 9th becomes indictment watch, the day after Election Day. But now when you see this reporting from CNN, I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? And look at Robert Mueller was a lifelong Republican, and they smeared him like he was AOC running the investigation. It was unreal what we saw.
Yeah.
So,
I'm losing faith. I'm losing confidence, and I don't like to say that. I mean, I'm in court every day, Dean, 9 to 5, watching my friends and fellow former colleagues, Kate Rakosi and Jeff Nessler, try a beautiful, beautiful prosecution against these, oath keepers who clearly committed multiple crimes against the United States, including, it looks like, a seditious conspiracy. The lead charge, I will say, Kate Rakosi, one of the lead prosecutors, I tried her first murder case with her. These are remarkable public servants working round the clock to bring justice to the American people. I don't understand why we can't be doing the same thing for Donald Trump and John Eastman, Rudy Giuliani, Flynn, and Sidney Powell, and Jeffrey Clark, and Roger Stone, and Bannon, and the rest of the cabal, the criminal cabal, the ruling class criminals. Because, Dean, if we don't hold them accountable for their crimes against the United States, we will lose it all. We will lose our republic.
I'm chatting with Glenn Kirschner. Obviously, I agree with you. It's something we've discussed before. Do you think there's a chance that, the reporting from CNN is like DOJ is considering it, and whatever happens there? Maybe they say no. Do you think November 9th, day after election day, actually begins some form of indictment watch, that even if they don't charge Trump, he could be charging a Giuliani or John Eastman, Jeffrey Clark, something like that?
Yeah, we had a Steve Bannon indictment watch, and that one turned out okay, even though Trump appointed Judge Carl Nichols, unbelievably put him on release pending appeal rather than incarcerating him, which he so richly deserves. That's a travesty of justice, and it shows the deep inequality in this country. But at least the Bannon watch resulted in an indictment and ultimately a conviction. Of course, the Mark Meadows indictment watch didn't turn out so good for us. No. But maybe it's time to start a Trump indictment watch. Of course, I think it has to be an indictment watch with a footnote. And I think we need to list, full disclosure, all of the crimes for which the statutes of limitation have expired. And that's inexcusable. And I can't explain why DOJ is letting it happen so that these charges can never be brought. But I think it's a good suggestion, Dean, that we start a very public Donald Trump indictment watch beginning of the day after the election.
That's what we're going to do, Glenn. We're starting indictment watch with Glenn and Dean. You can be first in this. But we have to start. We should. I'm not kidding, because I really want to write an article for some publication about the election's over, time to indict Trump. The window's done. Let's go. There's no more waiting for it. I will say this, and I wrote about this for MSNBC. This DOJ did charge an insurrectionist who was running for Michigan, the governorship, and he was an announced candidate. They indicted him 6 weeks out. And they also indicted two sitting Republican members of Congress, Duncan Hunter and another one upstate New York, a few years ago when they were running for re-election, and both were about 6-7 weeks out. So that seemed like that's really the window. Now, I know Trump is a former president. He's running for president. They're not going to wait to 6 or 7 weeks out. But I don't think him announcing should not prevent in any way or even hinder any kind of indictment, because everyone knows the investigation has been going on. It's very public now. It's not like they're beginning the investigation because he announces. That's a whole different scenario. And to your point, Glenn, the people on his side, no matter what you do, they're going to go, what about Hillary? What about Hunter Biden? All that stuff. You can't get them to agree. Trump could do anything. He could, Glenn, hear me out. Donald Trump could attempt a coup and incite a terrorist attack on our Capitol, and they still would like him. I know that's going out on a limb, right? Oh, no, that's what they did, and they still do like him. So it's not even going out on a limb. We know there's nothing he can do. By the way, going back, Glenn is at the Oath Keepers trial. Stuart Rhodes is there. I see you tweeting about it. He testified. When you hear things there, are there things, and it may not be as that I would like to hear it as much, but does Trump's role in ginning up lies about the election, did that come up? Or the Oath Keepers, you get a sense, made a decision on their own, and like, we're going to do this. We don't care what Trump says.
A little bit of both. There's certainly a lot of evidence of the Oath Keepers being determined one way or another to deny Joe Biden's certification. In fact, the lead defendant and the head of the Oath Keepers, Elmer Stewart Rhodes, infamously wrote an open letter saying, if Donald Trump refuses to invoke the Insurrection Act and basically put a stop to the certification of Joe Biden's election win, we, the Oath Keepers, will take up arms and do it ourselves. But there has been a smattering of talk about Donald Trump. But I think the prosecutors have been really wise to keep all of that to a minimum, because it's in this trial, it's largely a distraction. it's unnecessary to talk about Donald Trump inspiring or inciting the insurrection at all, because that information is not necessary to convict these defendants of a seditious conspiracy, of a conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, of obstructing an official proceeding, and of the 5 other felony charges that they're indicted on. You don't need Donald Trump to have said or done anything to convict these men. So I think the prosecutors are wise not to inject an inflammatory, divisive issue like Donald Trump into this trial any more than is necessary.
And what can you tell us? I saw you tweeting about Elmer Stewart Rhodes, the Oath Keeper leader, took the stand. The guy's a Yale-trained lawyer. He went to Yale Law School. What can you share about his testimony?
So I'm doing my video about it tonight. It'll post in about an hour or two. And but here's what I saw. He's only about 90 minutes into his testimony, and then they broke for the day, and he'll be back on the stand in continued direct examination on Monday. He opened strong, Dean. When he was asked his name by his lawyer, he said, "My name is Elmer Stewart Rhodes III, but I go by my middle name Stewart for obvious reasons." Okay, 1 point for old Elmer, but that was the only point he earned, Dean, because then he showed himself, and this is just straight up the way I see it. He showed himself to be an arrogant, pompous, self-important, bordering on grandiose, know-it-all, kind of a real I alone can fix it kind of guy. I mean, he was giving the jury a tutorial about how people should go about policing protests and riots, how the police, law enforcement officers do it all wrong, but how he and the Oath Keepers do it right. Mind you, Elmer has never been a cop, never been a member of law enforcement. He washed out, that's his testimony, of special forces. After a couple of years in the Army, he was put on some disability board for reasons that were not explained and spent like 3 years waiting to be discharged. So he didn't really do much Army time. I mean, the dude is a failure and a loser, but boy, does he have delusions, not diagnosable delusions, but he has delusions of grandeur. He went on to say, well, you know, the Oath Keepers would go to protests and we would embarrass the police officers because we did it so much better than them. And sometimes the police were inspired to do better because we were there. I mean, this was all mind-blowing. And then so the man is so arrogant. I kind of feel like a lot of the jurors have already got his number and they're sort of recoiling a little bit from the man that he is. But then here's the kicker. He testified that the election, he was asked by his lawyer, do you believe the election was stolen or rigged? He said the election was unlawful and unconstitutional. And he said, Dean, and this is before there was any fraud, it was unconstitutional because of some of the voting changes in the rules and procedures as a result of COVID. Before we get to the fraud, that rendered it unconstitutional. He is the arbiter, Dean, of whether an election is constitutional or not. And it was foreshadowing for what I think we're going to hear on Monday from him, which is that once he, Elmer, decided the election was unconstitutional because some state officials were changing procedures and protocols for voting as a result of COVID, he needed to take matters into his own hands. And he said as much. If Donald Trump doesn't invoke the Insurrection Act, the Oath Keepers will take matters into their own hands. This is not a defendant who should have ever seen a witness stand, but he's so arrogant, I'll bet his attorney could not talk him out of testifying.
You know, these guys, they think they're going to use this as a platform in a way. I mean, I don't know the man personally, but I mean, Hitler infamously did that in his own Harald Putsch trial, where he used it to make himself famous in Germany. He wasn't as well known. So some of them might be inspired just the idea, I'm going to tell my tale here, and America is going to see me for the hero I am and elect me Fuhrer in the future, or make me Fuhrer. So very last thing here, Glenn, you know, so Lindsey Graham shot down by the Supreme Court. If Fannie Willis, the Fulton County DA, are you holding out more hope there than you are for the Department of Justice for potentially bringing Donald Trump to justice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still holding out hope for DOJ to do it. I think the Lindsey Graham development was a good one, that the Supreme Court apparently unanimously said, Lindsey, just shut up and get your butt in the witness chair in the Georgia grand jury. So he's going to have to do it. He has a difficult decision to make. Does he plead the fifth? Because he undeniably has a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. One of his own tribe, Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, said Lindsey kept calling me and he was, in my estimation, quote, urging me to toss out lawfully cast ballots. That's from a fellow Republican. That clearly gives him a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I don't know if Lindsey will invoke it or will try to weasel his way through testimony with a bunch of I don't recalls and I didn't really mean that. But I can tell you, if he lies, and he may very well lie, then I think he's got a world of hurt, because Fannie Willis don't play. And I think she will charge him with any and all crimes if he lies to the Georgia State grand jury. Lindsey will probably also over-invoke the speech and debate clause privilege that the courts have given him a little bit of wiggle room to still invoke on some questions. He'll probably invoke it on, 75% of the questions. Then what do? We have to litigate it all over again. The endless delay, the weaponizing of the court system to run out the clock. But, we're in a better place now than we were before the Supreme Court told Lindsey, shut up and testify.
And I'm hopeful there as well. Your comment, just this sense, the goal of Donald Trump being able to commit crimes and be better than us. Like, he thinks he's better than us, but DOJ is telling all of us he's better than us. And that's fundamentally wrong. It's un-American. It just shouldn't happen. And I hope they step it up, my friend. So Glenn, follow him. Go to his YouTube page, Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner. And I was going to say Steve Kirschner. That's so weird. Glenn Kirschner. And follow him on Twitter. He's got a huge following on Twitter. Glenn, thanks so much for making time on a Friday night. I really appreciate it, brother.
Thanks, Dean.
Have a great weekend.